Mr. Ellzey?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Director Wray, thank you for being here. I'd like to thank your family for carrying the strain for what you do as well. The families of folks like you, the DEA administrator, folks in the military, the families bear the burden just as much as the member does. And in your role for the last 6 years as the director of FBI, you are the target of many, many threats overseas and here at home as well, from organized crime to drug cartels to foreign militaries. I thank you for your sacrifice and your service in that regard. Sometimes I open these questions up because the FBI topic sometimes becomes very popular, and I'll open these questions up to my constituents, see if they have a question for the director when I might be having a chance to talk to him. So I've got one right here, and I really like it. The FBI has properly earned our respect over the years as an honest practitioner of the rule of law. Do you perceive the degree to which many Americans feel that the FBI sometimes casts a negative eye on people and groups for political reasons?
I think the men and women of the FBI are dedicated, principled, objective public servants and patriots. We are a 38,000-person organization. We've been around for 115 or so years, and like any organization, we've had people that have made mistakes, and we've taken action where we can and with the tools that we have to deal with those mistakes. I think your constituent's question in some ways goes to a broader phenomenon that I see in today's world, which is that all too often in today's world, people's standard for whether they think something was fair or objective or independent boils down to whether or not they like the outcome or not, whether their side won or lost. That could be a Supreme Court decision. It could be any number of trials around this country. But if we get to a place where people decide that something was corrupt or lacking integrity because we don't like the outcome, then we're in a bad place. And especially when more and more those kinds of feelings then turn into violence, then we got a real problem. Is why we see so many threats against law enforcement, unfortunately, all over the country. So I hope that we at the FBI, by trying to make sure that we're doing the right thing in the right way, can earn the trust of your constituents.
Thank you. That's a great answer. Let's get something substantive. Title 42 is a rule dealing with the removal of illegal immigrants where an infectious disease is present. It's enforced by the Border Patrol, stops illegal immigrants from entering the United States on the grounds of a public health emergency. President Biden wants to repeal Title 42, and he wants to do so by May 23rd. Now, the FBI handles the collection of DNA from federal criminal cases and is already backlogged as it is. So if Title 42 is lifted, how does that affect the volume of DNA that y'all have to process? That can't be good.
Well, I don't have the figures right in front of me, but I can assure you, although I'm looking, but I can assure you that the sheer number of these DNA samples that we're processing, that CBP collects at the border, that we're then testing in order to potentially solve any number of violent crimes. We're talking about sexual assaults, homicides. So this is important work, and often the DNA is the secret sauce. It's the critical piece that solves the crime. And the number has been going up significantly, which is why we've made the request that we did. I think this year it's up dramatically from last year, and if Title 42 goes the way your question, I think, anticipates, and the way we're anticipating, I think the number is going to go through the roof, hence the budget request enhancement that we've made.
Okay. When we're talking about the border, I'm not going to ask you anything that's not under your purview. But when we talk about the threats that we're facing overseas, the Chinese often come up. Asymmetric warfare is a part of what they are accomplishing here. The cartels don't see us as customers, they see us as the enemy. And they're killing us at a rate not seen since World War II. 287 overdoses a day, 200 coming from fentanyl. 305 Americans lost their lives every day in World War II. So as we talk about China and their threat asymmetrically, in the time I have left, the Chinese police stations, we closed down a facility in Houston, and the Chinese police stations are coming up significantly and a lot. Are y'all working very hard to shut those down where you can find them?
Well, you mentioned two things, and they're both reflections of the Chinese government's, in my view, contempt for the rule of law and international norms. In Houston, we worked with Secretary Pompeo at the time and closed the Houston consulate, which was being misused by the Chinese government for all sorts of activities that we're just not going to tolerate in this country. Then secondly, there are these so-called police stations that have been set up in a number of countries without proper coordination that are, in many instances at least, illegal. And we recently, I called this out in testimony early last fall or mid last fall, we recently were able to conduct law enforcement actions, and one in New York was shut down. We've announced some arrests, I think just last week, I think it was, that included, among other things, obstruction of justice charges. And it's frankly outrageous that the Chinese government would think that it could set up shop here on our soil and conduct uncoordinated, unsanctioned, illegal law enforcement operations. And unfortunately, it fits in with a pattern of the Chinese government trying to basically run willy-nilly, disregard for the rule of law, and threaten, harass, stalk, surveil dissidents, in many cases Chinese Americans here in the United States. And it's not just happening in the United States, unfortunately, which is why the FBI is working closely with some of our counterparts in other countries where the Chinese government has shown a similar contempt for, again, international norms and the rule of law.
Thank you, Mr. Wray. Mr. Chairman, I've gone over. I apologize. I yield back.